on the move. Little dance step was good. Couple of bounces. Can take it himself and launch long. Inspirational.
Time ticking away. Stop it. For Silvani. What about that?
Mackay. Two in a minute. And they are dancing now, the Blues.
Almost Mackay. Walsh, here he is. Straightens up and has delivered. Is there nothing this young man can't do?
Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian. I'm joined as always by my good mate Lockie. And finally, we've had our first taste of footy for the 2022 season. Even though it was just a pre-season game, it's something. And look, we ended up beating St Kilda by 7 points in a bit of a seesawing affair. Lockie, what did you make of the hit out in our first glimpse of a Michael Foss Carlton side?
Well, obviously the lids are off. And we saw this coming and we knew that any kind of victory was going to mean that we were flag contenders as we hoped. But no, it was good to have footy back. And yeah, I'm really keen to chat about it today because I think there was so many promising things, individual performances and some of the team aspects that were promising. Of course, some things to work on like we knew would be the case. And there was definitely some sloppy play error-wise and things like that. And I'm sure we'll talk about the run that the Saints went on. But overall, I was really positive with the performance. And honestly, I didn't think that the 7-point margin reflected how much better we were on the day, in my opinion. But how did you feel watching the game?
Yeah, I think overall positive as well. It's so hard, these preseason games. You never really know exactly what to take out of it. Like if there is a negative, are you going, is that how it's going to be come round one? Because, you know, all you have to do is look back at us winning the preseason tournaments and then all of a sudden we win the wooden spoon and there's just such a big difference from what you see preseason to the actual season. So what I'm really looking for, I think, is are there any changes in the system? Are we seeing different things, different players, and just trying to find the positives rather maybe looking at those negatives? But probably the best thing, I mean, it's just good to get a win regardless, even if it was, 7 points in the end. There were positives, there were negatives. If you're looking to find some sort of narrative, I think it's there. But overall, I'm pretty happy. Probably the big thing for me as well, which is kind of a fun thing to look back on, is we did play St Kilda last year in a preseason game.
True.
So trying to almost compare just the difference a year on. And like we lost that game by 26 points last year. And there were almost themes in that game that really went on for the rest of the season. I just remember how easy St Kilda just moved the ball always across the ground. There were so many times we'd rush forward, that intercept possession and just out the back, easy goal. And all of a sudden, we started to build a little bit. We showed some offense, but then it just blew out again to that 26-point loss, which was really how most of the games last season ended up happening. So I think from this outing, I did see quite a lot of differences. Obviously, the win's the big one. But probably the question I have for you, Lockie, is did you notice any big differences in the game plan? That's probably what everyone was looking forward to. What did you make of I guess, Vossi's changes?
Yeah, I think early, one of the big positive things that I loved, and as you know, Zach Williams is absolutely my man. I loved, there seemed to be an emphasis on having guys running past from a mark or free kick to the sides to get that overlap. I mean, it's just so effective when it happens. And I think we spoke a fair bit about it last year because we're like, Zach and Sardi especially, it's like, that should be their bread and butter because we know how good they are as users of the ball. And so when a taller player or a ploughman or someone like that has the ball, we want them to be running past to get that overlap. And I couldn't remember a time in recent years where there'd been that much emphasis on it. And I feel like it died down a little bit later on in the game, but I really enjoyed seeing that. That felt like a shift in game plan to me.
Yeah, and it was interesting how it happened, whereas I think last year we spoke about just trying to get the ball into those kind of guys' hands, and it didn't happen as much as we wanted. And even last year, I felt that when we were actually attacking, it didn't seem systematic. Like, okay, ball is here, we do this. It was almost like, oh, I'm near the ball, so I'll just run through. Whereas even though it was just a small glimpse, I just remember so many times with Cripper getting it, all of a sudden he has 3 or 4 guys ready to just run past for the handball in different directions, which is going to be so good. And it was get the ball and get it straight through the corridor and string the ball together with a couple of handballs, really rushing through. And even when I think we had the ball in contests, it wasn't just, get the ball to the halfbacks, but it was find the best users of the footy and find the guys with speed out in space. It was getting it out to O'Brien, getting Zach Fisher we utilized quite well. It was almost like we finally were trying to get a system around the strengths of the players that we have. Cripps, Hewitt, extract the ball out of there, Chera with a bit of class on the outside, and then get it to the guys with speed. Like, it was just all the right things that you'd probably want in a game plan. And yeah, at times it didn't work and we struggled, particularly in that second quarter. But if you're looking for when it went right, how did it go? I think it's definitely some good sort of foundations going forward.
Yeah. And we kind of spoke last week about the things that we're hoping for this season. And we talked about, like, it's not about these huge jumps in players' ability going from being okay to being a superstar. It's guys like Williams, where I felt like he did the role yesterday that we're asking for. Where he gets around 20 touches, maybe. He pretty much hits a target every time he kicks the ball. There was a couple that weren't great. But like that, those couple of times where we had a center clearance, couple of handballs, Hewitt, Cripps involved, and then he's the one on the outside sprinting through, sitting inside 50. Oh, like that's us at our best, I think.
And he's got that like really low, sharp bullet pass that I didn't know he had until he came to us. That, like, I remember he did it in like the Collingwood game last year. That he did at one stage. I think he might have hit up Jack Silvani at one stage, and it was just perfect. There was another where I think it was in that second quarter where we were like really struggling. St Kilda get on top, and all of a sudden just wants to hit that corridor, hits the kick, all of a sudden it's open up the play, and there we are, we're out. We didn't end up kicking a goal from it, but it just created that chance. And if we can have that string in our bow where it's going against us, but we're still attacking that corridor, still doing those right things, it's just going to be really good for us. And there was probably two things I really noticed that were a big difference from last year. One of those, which might seem really stupid, and I wish I was at the game to be able to really notice this, but in that first quarter, we'd lose possession of the ball, and I just noticed every single player was running to a particular spot, pointing at everyone. I did not see one player on the field not pointing and directing traffic and saying, no, you get here, and trying to set up that zone, set up that defensive web, which, maybe it broke down a little bit in that second quarter when St Kilda were finding different ways to move the ball. But just knowing that there's a clear direction from when we don't have the ball of you need to be here, and I'm going to make sure that you're there. Whereas last season, it was just everyone just running to the ball, or everyone just sprinting back in defense. There wasn't a system to it. And that seems like the word we're saying so much, but that's what it was. And I was just so happy that there was, I guess, finally some defensive nous in the way that we were going to actually go about it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic call. I was hoping that was going to be the thing that you mentioned, because I definitely felt the same way. And we've heard them say they didn't feel like there was a system like that sometimes in place. And so, that's super promising. What was the other big one that you took away?
Yeah, the other big one was, and it was something I think I was crying out for quite a lot last year, and it's so basic, but just backwards handballs when under pressure. It goes back to kind of what we were just talking about when we were in attack mode, and it was getting all these runners coming off from halfback and exploding forward. When we had the ball, we were under pressure in the contest. All we were doing immediately was, okay, I'm turning back and just handballing it off to whoever's there. And again, there was 2 or 3 options. We could just keep going back to the next player, buy ourselves some extra time until we have a player out in space. You just take the pressure off it, and then either look laterally or look to attack inboard. And all of a sudden, we've bought ourselves some time. The pressure's been taken off, and then we can attack. And it was something that was just missing last year. There was so much panic and forward handballing under pressure that's when you get yourself into trouble. So it was a good change to know that we had those guys there and we were actually looking to do it. And I think that those are the little foundations that have made me excited for the season going forward, because I can actually look at how we're playing and go, I think that that's how you become successful. Whether we get there or not, who knows? But the foundations, I think, are being laid.
God, I love the positivity that you're coming with. I agree. And it goes back to what we were saying at the start. Like that's how guys like O'Brien, who may not be the ones winning it themselves inside, but then we get to make the most use of his skills and bring those guys into the game and just make better decisions. So that's great. God, surely you must have some negatives to talk about. Come on.
I do. We will get to them, but I reckon we start nice and positive.
I love it.
Probably another one was just when we were playing our best. And I think you can really just highlight that first quarter it was just first option. And we were using handballs a lot more than kicks. It was just, I've got the ball, I look up, I see a player who is free and moving, handball it off. Don't think about it too much. And I think Cripps was one of those players that he didn't seem to be doing too much that we saw quite often last season. It was just, okay, I'm going to extract the ball, get it to the players that need to get the ball and go on with it. So I was pretty happy with, I guess, those things. We'll get onto some negatives, which was probably maybe that second quarter. Unfortunately conceded another that ended up being a 5-goal swing in the end. It did seem a little bit different than other seasons, but I want to get your take on it. Are you as down on that as some Carlton supporters out there? What did you, I guess, make of that 5-goal swing?
I mean, I like talking about the negatives because this is where we see the opportunities that we can improve, and it makes it not a 7-point win, and it does make it that 50 points. So I don't mind that we talk about these things. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, the first thing to say is it seemed we weren't there. It seemed like there was a scoring end. I don't know if that was just by chance,
interesting,
or not. But like, there definitely it all seemed to be going in that direction. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel as down on it, I suppose, in recent years. It didn't feel, at least to me, like a landslide of like those times last year where we're like, have we touched the ball for 15 minutes? There was still times in that quarter, I can't remember, maybe it was like 0-6 or something that we kicked. We were still getting the ball in there. It was like, if we were able to convert some of these chances, it wouldn't have been this run on. Yeah. What's your take on that second quarter? I mean, it's not just that. There was still some other things, I suppose, that we obviously didn't do well, but it didn't feel as bad to me.
Yeah. Just double check to get the official score, and I believe it was 5 behinds there. So you're very close on that one.
Yeah.
Sorry to correct you.
I like it.
But yeah, it was an interesting one. I think that at the start of that quarter, I felt like we really dominated with the ball. We had multiple inside 50 entries, and I think you can easily say, oh, maybe if Harry's there, you end up clunking one and you kick an extra couple of goals that he just will. But I think the entries maybe weren't amazing. It started to get a little bit scrappy. I don't think we were just as clean everywhere. Even in the stoppages, we were missing some handballs. We were fumbling a little bit more. And maybe that was because St Kilda upped the pressure, and it was the first time in a while. And maybe it's just a bit of ring rust. Who knows what it is? But I'm like you. I didn't think it was as bad. I liked the fact, and I think a lot of Carlton supporters have brought this up, where we were still trying to play primarily the same way. We were still, trying to attack that corridor, still trying to do those things. I think the kick handball ratio, we started to kick a little bit more, which again, that probably happens when pressure, comes. You're trying to find those little short options. You maybe don't have the space to just use the handball through the middle. But I think when you look at the goals that St Kilda kicked in that quarter, you've got Jordan Boyd turns it over, which is just a very poor mistake. They kick an easy goal out of it. I think there was another one where O'Brien fumbled a mark holding the ball. They end up kicking a point from it, but it's just another scoring shot that you've given to the opposition that just normally should not be there. It was just a pretty poor mistake rather than system breakdown. St Kilda's run through us. I think there was another one where King ends up getting a mark, and it was just like, I think Williams slipped. Wiedering didn't have the best position, and sometimes that's just going to happen. The good key forward is going to win a contested mark. There was another one late as well that was just individual errors where I think there was 3 players running towards the ball. Newman, instead of going to pick it up,
everyone
goes to bump.
Man. Yeah.
Lob, I don't know what he did. He ends up falling over, and all of a sudden Higgins just picks it up and kicks the goal, and you're just going, all you had to do was just go the ball there, and you've just won the contest. So I think a few of those goals there, you can easily fix them. It wasn't like systematically it broke down and all of a sudden St Kilda just completely dominated. And probably down the other end, you've got that, Kennedy running into the forward 50. He absolutely burnt Fisher, and whoever passed it to Kennedy burnt Fish. Ends up kicking a point when he was running into 50 with no pressure. We've got Charlie's miss from outside 50. There was another half chance where I think Hewitt had the ball, maybe took a little too long, snapped it under pressure. He missed. So we did have chances to kick goals, and we probably should have kicked 2 or 3 in that quarter. Plus, it is preseason. And I think the big thing on why I'm not as negative about it is I think you hear from Voss in that sort of presser at the end of the game. And I think, they asked him the question of what do you make of the 5-goal swing? And he sort of just almost scoffed at it in a way. He did not seem concerned that it was some massive problem. I think he said something along the lines of like the players lost a bit of field position out there, but he didn't seem too concerned. So I guess I'm not going to seem too concerned. I'm buying into what Vossi's doing until I have a reason not to. So
100%.
if he's not worried about it, I'm not going to be worried about it for now.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think, yeah, you're right. There was the Charlie one. I just want to touch on him quickly because I was really pleased with his performance, even though he wasn't able to convert all those attempts because he did have a lot of goes at it. But yeah, I was really happy with him as basically as the number one option. I thought if he just had converted half of the ones that he had to go at, he would have well and truly done his job. And yeah, and if he had done that, we wouldn't be talking about this swing, and we also wouldn't have been talking about it being a close game.
Yeah, I think for Charlie, like the main thing was just like get through unscathed, which there was a bit of chatter at the end whether he had hurt that knee or not, but the club don't seem phased again. So I'm going to trust them until I have reason not to. It's hard. I don't know what I was expecting from Charlie going into that game. There was sort of a bit of hype around him. He was apparently doing really well in preseason and everything. So there's a bit more hype around, are we going to get the Charlie that we saw kick 7 against the Doggies? And I think realistically, we're not going to get that just yet. So just to see him out there, I thought he competed really well. Every time he took a bit of a knock, he got back up, which is all you want to see. And he still had chances to kick goals. The one from 50, I think he missed a couple from set shot.
Yeah.
As you say, he converts those. You're saying, wow, Charlie's kicked 3 and how good is this? Plus the fact that, Harry wasn't out there, which probably isn't the ideal scenario at the moment. You've got a guy coming off, a long-term injury. The only other key forward really in that forward line was Brody Kemp, who hasn't really played there that much, isn't really seen as probably the one or number 2 key forward. He's probably more that third kind of almost like your JSOS role that we've seen in the last couple of seasons. So to go into a game where Charlie Curnow's your main forward, I was pretty happy with his performance. All I really want from him is just to get more match fitness because it's going to take a while. He's missed 2 years of footy. Seeing him do anything is good for me. And I think he even set up a goal at one stage. So you can't complain too much.
For sure. Yeah, you're right about the comparisons to peak him. But I guess I'm thinking about it of how he looked in those last few games last season.
Yeah.
Where, like he was leading up the ground, but he wasn't clunking them. Like he was getting spoiled. And we were just like, at least he's getting up the ground. Yesterday or the other day, he was at least clanking those marks and setting things up. So, yeah, good for me.
Yeah, it definitely felt more like a guy who had played some footy instead of, as we were saying last season, which is like him being out there was the positive. And now it seems like he's actually starting to do things that a regular footballer would do. Probably in that, I guess I want to touch on probably that second half there because we had that, 5-goal swing. And then it's kind of like, well, how do we react to that? St Kilda's got a bit more control into the game. I think they had the lead at halftime. What do we do? And for me, I honestly thought that we controlled the rest of the game, and it felt like we were then 2-3 goals up for the rest of the game, even though it was only 7 points. Is that how you saw the second half? Did you think we just had control of it?
Absolutely. And my God, it is so nice watching a game when the scores get to 60 all or whatever they were and not having that stress. Oh my gosh. That cannot be understated. I was just watching. I'm like, wow, this feels so nice that if we lose this, I don't actually really care.
Yeah.
So that was nice. But yeah, I thought the same thing. Even though they outscored us late, I didn't really feel like we lost that kind of, I don't know. I felt like we had the hold. And yeah, I know we've spoken about it. We could have converted so many other opportunities. These snaps around goal, these guys not converting that usually would. So they're the things that I'm not. They're just the preseason jitters. Some of those plays in the third quarter, especially where it was just turnover, both teams. It's like that was like the real. You can feel that this is preseason.
And I think the longer that those kind of games go for as well, you start to see the players tire because they just have not had that amount of sort of game time at all in such a long time. So I think next week, Thursday against Melbourne is going to be the test because obviously reigning premiers, we want to see how we come up against them, even if it is preseason. But it was good to see us, I guess, react in the second half and not go into our shells and go, oh, well, St Kilda's just kicked, 5 in a row on us. They've now got control of the game. We sort of wrestled it back. And that was probably the big difference again from that preseason game last year where I didn't feel like we controlled really any stage of the game. It felt a bit more like a more professional performance, if I can say that, in a preseason game that doesn't mean a
Yeah.
lot. So I'm pretty happy to build on that. What players,
Yeah.
let's go specifics now. What players stood
man.
out for you in this game? Because I know this is the fun part of this podcast.
Oh, I could pick so many names here. Who do I want to talk about first? Let's start with Ches.
Yeah. It's a good
What'd you
one.
make of his game?
Unbelievable. Like, that is exactly what I think I was hoping to see from him. Just everyone's has used the same word, and it's just class. That's just what he is. He's that polish on that midfield. I wish we could see, Walshy in there as well, because I felt like Chera's almost forced to have to do a little bit more inside. But I think, the commentary summed up his goal and his left foot perfectly, where it was everyone's getting sucked into the contest. He knows he's not going to affect it, and there's no point him going in. So all he has to do is just sit a couple of meters out the back, gets the hands out, and all of a sudden he kicks a goal. And on his oppo as well is
so
beautiful.
Nice.
And he just, I noticed he'd do that so many times. And now that we've got, your Hewitt in there, your Cripps, you've got, Kennedy that we can be that inside bull. Just having a player like him on the outside is just perfect. It's the, icing on the cake for exactly what we're after in this midfield. What did you make of his game?
He's just the perfect addition to this team. It just makes me so happy. I love, I've spoken about it a bit, like these guys like Sardi, when he's got the ball, you just feel like he's reliable and you feel like he's going to make the right decision and also execute it. It just felt like any time that we were, getting flustered in a tight, stressful situation, get it out to him. He's going to use it well, make the right call. His left shoe is unbelievable on this man. I just love so much about it. I love that he converted those two on the scoreboard as well. Like, that's just going to help us so much this year.
Yeah, look, I don't know if this is a good comparison at all, but I'm going to make it because there was a couple of things that like reminded me of his player. So don't come at me when you're like, he plays nothing like him. But I got kind of like Mark Murphy vibes from a few of the things Chera was doing, like being just that class on the outside. Like, as you mentioned, as soon as you need someone, everyone's under the pump, you handball it out to him and he just makes a good decision by foot and everything's calm. And then, going forward and sneaking and kicking a couple of goals. It's like, that's what we've missed, I think, from the last maybe couple of years of Murph playing in that midfield. And then now that obviously he's retired, having someone like that in that midfield mix, I think we're finally starting to see just a better sort of complementary number of players there. It's not just one type of midfielder. We've now got a few. And that probably goes to my next point of another guy that just complements what we have well, that was probably the most impressive guy out there for me from what I saw, which was George Hewitt. I said on the last podcast that I hadn't seen a massive amount of him. I assumed we were getting some, inside midfielder. I didn't know his disposal was so good, and I didn't know he did more of the midfield stuff. I just saw him as this brute that goes in and tackles and wins the ball, but he does more. He's come in as almost like the Ed replacement, but in no disrespect to Eddie, obviously he's just that upgrade where all the other facets of his game he's just, so much better at. And the way that I think early in that first quarter, I noticed him so much where he wasn't just, putting on the blocks. He did those, but when he'd win the footy, it wasn't like he'd just, handball it out and that's it. He'd be running forward with the ball, kicking it and doing all those other things that I think he's almost, and maybe this is a big call. Maybe this is the big call of the episode, but he could be one of those players that, maybe not to this extent, but like a Jack Steele where he was just known as that tagger and everyone just saw him as that. All of a sudden you maybe unleash him as a bit more of a midfield role and it goes to the next level. And I know I'm not saying that, Hewitt's going to do that, but I can definitely see him taking those steps and being a lot better of a player than maybe what we've seen at Sydney in that limited tagging role.
The midfield mix was one of my biggest positives from the game. And I already felt this kind of connection and chemistry between the guys in there with Chera and Hewitt and how they were working with Rick. With Walshy not even there yet, Kennedy was great, I thought. And it's the positive is that it's only going to get better from here.
Yes.
As they get to know each other more. All that just the way that they're all linking together, it just feels like they're all going to be able to play to each other's strengths really well. And it's hard not to get too excited about that.
100%. So who was another player that excited you, Lockie?
Another player that excited me. I think we should probably talk about your man. I thought Dirds put in a really good performance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting one. I maybe have a bit of a negative take on the forward
Please.
line, which I definitely want to touch on at some stage. But I think individually,
Okay.
him and always like the pressure that they were giving was really good. I liked from Durden that I felt like he pushed up the ground a little more.
Yes.
Felt like I noticed him all of a sudden, the ball's in the middle and Durden's in there trying to affect the contest, putting on pressure, trying to win the ball and expand out. And I think that's going to be a really good thing. Probably my negative, and it's something, as I said, I'm going to touch on later as we talk about maybe some causes for concern, is just maybe the goals that are getting added. I'm just a little bit worried about the amount of goals that we need from this forward line. And maybe it was too much to ask for in just like one game of footy. And I think it is something that will evolve and happen for this football team. But like him and Always, I think they might have only got like one each. I want to start seeing them in these pre-seasons, have a bit more flair and just kick a few more goals, because I think the pressure was there created, but we maybe didn't lock it in enough into that forward 50, particularly in that second quarter. We had so many repeat efforts. We just failed to really lock it down, create those, repeat stoppages that end up leading to goals. But I think, over round, definitely positive steps. And I think they're going to grow. Like Durden has only played something like 2 AFL games. So he's definitely going to be someone going forward that's going to take some big steps.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really fair assessment. I think the thing that, why is such a positive for me is like, we liked what we saw in those couple games last year. We're like, oh, we could have something here. And he hardly went near the ball in those couple of games. Yeah. Like he did one or two nice things in each game. And in this game, I felt like he was popping up everywhere and he was moving up the ground, like you said. And for the position that he's playing as being that small forward, this game for me made me think, yes, I feel like we've got one here. He's someone to persist with as this small crumbing forward, because he can get the ball, he can move at the ground, he can be the linker. So I guess that's because the small forwards is still just one of those kind of still a bit of a question mark piece for us about what our best team looks like with these small forwards. And there's probably some other positive guys that we can talk about there. But yeah, I'm feeling even more confident about him being in our best.
Yeah, it's one of the hard positions to play just in general, because you normally don't see a lot of the ball. And I do agree with what your sort of sentiment there is. Like last season at the end, you saw like little glimpses and you're like, oh, but he still looked like a rookie, like a guy that had played 2 games. He seemed a lot more like seasoned in a way. Like he looked 100%. Like an AFL player rather than someone that's just coming in and you're just hoping to see little things. It looked like if you're picking your team, and we'll do best 22s in a couple of weeks once we've seen a bit more of, the squad, it looks like, he is definitely a lock there now, rather than being that guy that you're going, oh, should it be someone else? Has he nailed it down? I think I've seen enough to just be like, yep, he's definitely going to be that now.
Awesome. You want to throw one out there?
Yeah, definitely. I've got plenty to chat about. I think we've got to talk about Big Rick. Everyone's been hyping him up, talking, is this a return of a potential, Brownlow Cripper? And he was just back to his best. He looked healthy. He was moving well. He was playing simple. If I had to give a best on ground, I think it's probably going to Cripper from what he was doing from the start into the finish. I didn't feel like he dropped away at any stage. Just, he's so strong when he wins the ball. The way he's able just to evade tackles, give himself 2 seconds, and then get those hands out. It's something that it's the reason that no one in the AFL is as good as him at that. And if we can just, get that Cripper week in, week out, see the growth in Hewitt protecting him, Chair on that outside, Walshy when he comes back, it is going to be so exciting. And I was very impressed. Hopefully this is the return of what we saw a couple of years ago.
I should have mentioned that when we were talking about George. That was one of the things I noticed was that Cripper, like when Hewitt was getting tackled, so good at keeping those hands free and getting a good handball out and not getting caught. Yeah, God, Rick. Oh, that was one of the things I was getting so excited about. Seeing him at training, it's like, gee, he is moving like 2018 Rick out there. And yeah, he's just bloody awesome. He had the one moment where you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And you always get it. It's like Willow. It's like when it comes off 90% of the time, you love it. And then the one time you don't. But yeah, God, I hope he can deliver like that this year.
Yeah, it's that weird thing with Rick where he just... it's like he wants to just keep trying to take on tackles. Like he'll get free and then he'll just be like, no, I want to go back into the contest. I need to shake just one more tackle to make this for the highlight reel. But I mean, the fact that he can do it and like, yeah, sometimes it's not going to come off, but I'm honestly happy for him to do it because it's what he does best. And that's how he gets out of those situations and bursts us forward. And yeah, now that we're starting to get a better, dynamic few players around him that complement him better, it's just going to go up and up and up. And yeah, finally, I think this midfield is looking a lot more exciting than it did last year for sure. Another player, hit me with someone else that you like to see out there.
I wish we had 3 of this man. Brodie Kemp. I wish we could have him one in every third of
every line. Yeah. Oh.
Because he looked so like you're right. This is one of the first times we've seen him play in this position, and it looked natural. Took some nice marks. The goal was beautiful. Like I genuinely feel like in a few years we're going to be like, wow, wish we could have him in the midfield, forward, and down back.
It's such an important, I think, role for us to have like this swing man where, or you've got an injury, or you need game plan. You're struggling down back. Chuck Kempy there. He can play tall, he can play small. Chuck him forward if you need a goal, if you need a tall, or even, chuck him as a big body in the midfielder just to create something. He's such an interesting specimen. The fact that he hasn't played that many games and he just looks so composed down in the forward line. I know that's where he spent, I think, majority of his time as a junior playing a bit more of that sort of forward role. So he should have that craft there, but going into the game with just Charlie and Kemp, it doesn't excite you too much. You're kind of a little bit worried going on.
Exactly.
Is this going to work? But he just, I don't think he got a lot of the ball, but when he was near it, he was creating. He was, working so hard to get it, to do the right things. He's just going to, I agree with you. He's going to be one of those important players in the next couple of years where you're going, gee, if Brodie Kemp's out this week, we're in trouble because we just need him to plug any hole. And that's probably the exciting thing because sometimes with a younger player, you almost need to just settle them in a position because you start throwing them around and they lose confidence and it's not working. Seeing him last year playing well in defense, I know it's only one game, but he seemed to play well in the forward line. If he can do that at this young, inexperienced age and we can throw him around and it doesn't affect him, that is just another massive, massive positive for this squad.
Especially when it feels like there is going to be some experimentation in different areas, just with the players that we've got this year and the few changes that have happened. So we could get to the end of the season and who knows? He might have locked down a role in a different part of the ground, and I'm all for that if it happens. Throw another one out there.
Mate, I've got to throw out your man, big Zach Fisher. That was just a lovely performance from him. He's someone that I've been pretty down on. I think last season and probably the season before, he's been below expectations of what everyone's been wanting. Hasn't had that clean run really at that early start of the season. I think he missed preseason the year before, and then last year goes down with syndesmosis, like right before the season starts. So it hasn't been good fitness-wise for him before the season. And maybe that's played a role, I think, as well, just structure-wise and what Teague was doing. Did he have a proper role that week in, week out, he goes, this is what I'm meant to do in the team? And you go from there. Whereas it looks like Voss just has a really clear idea of what he wants Fisher to be. He's this high half forward that goes in and pinch hits in the midfield when they want to throw some speed in there. And I think that's the perfect way to use him. Like we mentioned earlier, it seemed like we were trying to get the ball in the hands of these outside runners. And I think Fisher is perfect for that. What really impressed me this week was I thought he was pretty clean with the ball at times. And his kicking was a lot better than I think what I've seen previously. So if he can really keep expanding on this, knowing this midfield that we have where at times you can say it's a little bit slow with, Hewitt isn't the fastest guy. Obviously, Cripper, Kennedy, Chera's fine, but he doesn't necessarily have electric pace. You've got Walshy, who we miss at the moment. Putting a dynamic player like Fisher in there is just going to help, create different avenues that we can find different ways to exploit the opposition. And I think Fisher could be a really important cog, and fingers crossed, this is his breakout year because you've said previously that he is someone that struggles to find a lot of the ball and he can go in and out of games. this was a game. It's only a preseason game, but I honestly felt that he was there from start to finish and he was getting involved in everything, which is a big tick for me this early.
Definitely. He's one of the guys that I've just been obsessed with since he was drafted and have had such high hopes for. And the concern going into this season, now that we've got these guys like Dirds and Owies and Motlop going for these small forward positions, it's like, Fish, if you can't have a clear role of what you are bringing, like your unique role that you're bringing to the team, and there's no place for you in the midfield and none in the forward line, then you might not be best 22.
Yeah.
But what he did in this game is exactly that. He was doing something that no one else was. He was getting in. I was trying to put my finger on what it was that made it so different. I felt like even his teammates were getting him in better situations where he had more space. And so instead of him getting a really short handball and he's still kind of under pressure, he's getting tackled, he can't really do his thing. He was having more space to be able to use the ball really well. Put the Jets on for a quick 6 steps, then use the ball. Oh, I like it. And if he can start hitting the scoreboard as well, which is something I'm always crying out for him to do, lock him in as well.
It was just such a big change where, I mean, that's like the perfect summation of just what we were seeing that was so different. Whenever we were under pressure, just get those couple of handballs out the back and then all of a sudden get it into the creative players and play to their strengths. Fisher, Williams, I don't know how many times, we have to mention all these players, but it was, find O'Brien and find him in space. Don't just handball it to him when he's under pressure, because that's not what those guys are good at. You don't want them in the thick of it. You want them creating space, pushing wide out of the contest, lob the ball over to them, and then let them explode and create. And I think when we played the best, we were really utilizing those guys and getting them to have that run. And so it's everything you say. We just need everyone to play their little role to make sure that, Hewitt's in there putting on that block so Fisher can get out the back. And it didn't work every single time. And it's not going to, I think for the short period of time, it's going to take a while for this to gel. A coach coming in for the first time, completely changing things. I think we have to be patient, but I think the signs were there. At least we got to see glimpses of it working. And it was so good to see. Do you have any other players that you really liked what they brought to the preseason game against the Saints?
I could probably name about 20 names, but I'll finish with this one. And we don't have to talk about him long because he's just really good at football. But Jesus has just we talked so much last year about how important we think he is just to the structure of the team, and we notice when he's not there. Oh, there's just so many things that he brings. Like his tackling pressure is always so ferocious. Kicked a couple goals. Just doing all the nice things, being that really nice link up player. And I still think that he can get better from where he is now when everyone around him lifts as well. But he's just it's crazy to think how far he's even just come. Like when he started, we weren't sure where he was going to fit and if he could become a player that even was a best 22 guy. So I'm just so happy with him. And he's just so important. We need him to be healthy. And he went into the ruck, which we love.
Yeah. Mate, I know how much you love him being that second ruck. And I was going to ask you a question. On. And I will definitely finish my wrap up of JSOS with asking you this question. But last season, there was so much chatter about him being such an important player for us. And there were those stats coming out like when we don't have JSOS in the team, we tend to lose. When he's in there, we win. And he just does all, as you say, he does all the right things and he does them well. Like we don't necessarily need him to kick, 4 goals. We don't need him to have 30 possessions. If he can kick his 1 to 2 every week, take a couple of nice marks, push high, be that almost pseudo sort of center half forward that links the midfield to the forward line. That's an important role. And he brings that spirit that we all know he's going to, where he just gives every single thing for the whole game. And it's interesting deploying him as that second ruck. I wonder if that is the plan going forward. And that's sort of the question I think I have to ask you is seeing, I guess, them use him in this role because TDK is obviously injured and miss. Is that how you want us to play for the rest of the season? Would you just say, okay, play JSOS, have him the second ruck? And I guess, do you have maybe as a second part of this question, is there a ruckman that you would rather him play with? Do you want Pito to be that guy? with JSOS, or would you rather a TDK with JSOS?
Oh, mate. I almost already feel like I'm going to be backtracking on our discussion from the last episode because I've always been very. Oh, here we go. I'm going to have to eat it here.
I'm excited about this.
This is a bit of a diversion, but I thought that Brad was really nice, and I liked what I was seeing from him. I can see a world now. I don't know. I'm growing on the idea. I'm not sure if you're still of this frame, but running both Pitt and TDK in the team. As much as I love what JSOS does, and I like him being a ruck option, and I like him taking ruck contest in the forward line when it needs to happen.
Yeah,
I'm not opposed. I'm not saying it's my number one, but I'm not opposed to the idea of running both Brad and TDK out there. So it's a little bit of a fence sit. Essentially, all the combinations that we've got now, I feel comfortable with. Whether it's JSOS being up there and taking a bunch of them, I'm happy for it. But I'm also happy if we're going to go with the two real solid rucks too.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Pito goes against Melbourne because it was probably the knock I have on Pito's performance. I thought he was the better ruckman, but the quality of opposition that he was coming up against wasn't great. It wasn't St Kilda's first or second option in the ruck there. So coming up against, a Maxi Gawn is going to be very interesting to see exactly how he measures up.
Definitely.
But he is someone that I can see being the ruck for us this season. It's probably still an issue, the ruck position, because Pitt hasn't necessarily nailed it down, and I'm not sure if he's the future. TDK has had his injury issues. I'm still not sure if he's going to be the solo ruck. And I think JSOS is a fine option to have there. I like that we've found a guy that, worst case, chuck him in there. He's going to do a fine job. And what he brings, being almost that extra midfielder, outweighs what you lose in the ruck, which I think is an interesting thing.
Agreed.
I don't think I have a position just yet on the rucks and what I think we can go with. I like the idea of running the two because I think with Charlie and Harry having a couple of injury clouds, having an extra in that forward line can hopefully help, potentially with a TDK that's a bit more experienced in that forward line. But then maybe the issue becomes where does Kemp play then? Because if he's playing that third tall, is that too tall? It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out because whether we maybe love the depth and think it's at the highest standard, there is plenty of options to chuck around in this football team. And maybe one week we go one way to match up against a certain opposition and exploit sort of parts of their system, and then maybe we change it up. So I think it is finally exciting to have a few different ways we can go. I guess the last player that I really wanted to talk about in maybe a really positive light was, I guess, Oscar McDonald was someone that has been the one to talk about in the off season. It's who replaces Jones. Can anyone do it? And honestly, I liked what I saw. It wasn't, you don't look at it and go, oh, he's the all-Australian fullback. No one's going that high on it, but just played his role. And that's all I think we're asking this season is, with the Jones, he had that lockdown ability. He had that intercept ability. It looks like we've split that up into two different players, which might work better system-wise where just focus on the one thing. McDonald just lock down, and then we'll use Gov as that intercept player. Wiedering, you can kind of do a bit of both, float a little bit higher. And I think what McDonald brings is just going to help everyone else play their role even better in that defense. And I don't think he was, completely overclassed, which is something that is probably the biggest knock on McDonald is he going to be at a high enough standard to play that lockdown role effectively in that back line? And from what I saw, at least for now, I think that's an absolutely fine option. And I'm very confident in having, Goat Mac down there as that fullback. Me too.
I've changed my tone for sure since we last spoke. It's clear that these two are ahead of Young in the pecking order currently. And I was pleased with the output of both of them, to be honest. You're right. It's an interesting role to replace in Jones because he seemed to make Weeder's life a lot easier with what he was able to do, and that's what I'm hoping for. It's like I don't want Jones coming out to also detract from Weeder's and make him not be able to do the things that he does so well. I agree, Oscar. Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved that little turnover right in front of goal, which he managed to mop up. But you get that from Jonesy too,
Yeah.
so he's just doing his best.
Mate, at least he's not giving those, deliberate straight through when it's like, what are you doing? But yeah, look, I think like you mentioned, it's making everyone else's role easier. And if he's not having to worry about intercept, you're then not causing that problem of him being stuck in two minds and then causing that turnover anyway. Because his first thought is just kill the ball, and someone else is going to do that intercept role. So I think it works out really well. But we've talked about some positives. We now need to go negative. We need to be well balanced in this approach.
Of course.
Who for you, and maybe I will go a little bit with positive on the end, I guess, who struggled for you, or who do you just want to see more either out of or more of from that practice match?
Yeah, well, and understanding that we had a lot of players out, either that are injured or that just weren't in that mix. So not expecting everybody that's going to play this game to play the house down. I thought it was pretty clear that Boyd struggled. I didn't feel like he just didn't look like he was up to the, I suppose, the standard of how everyone else was going. And I'm sure that he would have been feeling the pressure, and that it was like, this is his opportunity to play for a spot. And that was clear with some of the decisions and turnovers that he had. So I'm also not of the position that he's going to be playing every week or anything either. I know that he is probably looking into the best 22 at the moment. So we're not expecting him to be the best, but I felt it was pretty clear that he isn't one of our, key selections.
I did kind of feel that, like, when he did turn that ball over, which is just a clear error, my first kind of thought was, well, as bad as this is, he's not in the best 22, so I probably don't have to worry about that goal happening for most of the season. It was a tough game for Boyd. He's been a bit hyped internally over preseason with doing some really nice things, and maybe he's a bit more of a chance to break into that team playing this sort of small defender halfback role. But it's just one we have so many players of. So yeah, I think he made a bunch of mistakes, but I liked that. I don't felt it stopped him from trying. It didn't feel like he made that mistake, and then all the mistakes he made after that was because he made that initial one and he lost his confidence. It just seemed like he was, continually to try and apply himself. He just maybe wasn't at that level just yet. And look, he might not ever get there, but this is what preseason is about. It's getting experience into these guys that may not play a lot this season, and getting them to learn their craft, learn those roles. And I guess seeing as well for Boydie, what's he like at an AFL level? Because that's the first time he's really had that chance. And I think from that, you go, okay, here's all the things you need to work on to be at this level and to, take over someone's spot in that best 22. So while I think, it's so easy to just, shit on his performance and be like, oh, he was no good, shouldn't be anywhere near the team, delist him, which I've seen a couple of people say and things like that. I think you can easily just look at the other way and go, okay, here's some deficiencies. He did some okay things as well. Let's hope he builds. And that's how I'm going to look at a guy like Boydie in that game.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's no conclusions around players or anything to be made from one game. And if he does get another go, and if they give him a go at senior level at some point in the season, I'll be happy to see it.
The interesting one for me that I want to bring up to have a bit of a discussion on is Lockie O'Brien. I don't think he had a poor performance, so I'm not going to say he's someone that necessarily struggled. But how do I phrase this? I think he showed a lot of really positives. His good was really good, but I thought his bad was quite bad, and he made a lot of just silly errors, like has that chance to take that mark, fumbles it, turns the ball over with a hold in the ball. There was another one where I think it was sort of like near the wing. He goes back with the flight and just almost already thought he had the mark and then ends up fumbling it. Might have got a turnover there, and another holding the ball at some stage where it was just trying to do a little too much. And he's an interesting one because at the moment it seems like that wing role is his. There were only 3 players that rotated on the wing all day. It was Setterfield, it was O'Brien, and it was Noon. So it looks like he's probably at this stage going to line up round 1. And
agreed.
I liked the way we did try to use his strengths at times, but he still, looks like he lacks a little bit of confidence. So I really wanted to know what you made of his game, and do you see him as someone that should be in our best 22? Because there's so many people that
Mm.
don't like what Lob brings to the team. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned in the last episode that I felt that he was feel like that he's the most natural wing option and that he
Yeah.
is the number one wing option going forward. And there wasn't anything in this game for me that didn't make me think that that was the case.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying about the mistakes and those aspects. Almost similar to Boyd. I think even the commentators might have mentioned it, that it seemed like he didn't have confidence at some times, and like maybe dropping his head a little bit with those errors. Yeah. And so hopefully it's like, if this season, if he can get a good proper run at it, like it's the thing that we've been calling for years now. It's like, let's get him in, let's get guys like him and Dow in and give them a proper good 10-game stretch to really cement themselves. I still feel like he absolutely can be our number one wing option this season. Once he gets that confidence up, those errors start to disappear. We know that his best, like you said, is one of the best in our group. If he's just doing those bullet passes, hitting targets inside 50, making the right decisions, fantastic. So yeah, the wing is a really interesting one, which we can talk about more if you want, because yeah, pretty much anyone can put their hand up and play a really good game on the wing, and they may just cement that spot.
No, I agree with you. And look, I'm happy you've taken the optimistic side to O'Brien, because even though I maybe said he made a couple of mistakes and things like that, I still do see him in a positive light. The more I've, I guess, tried to listen to more footy content and listen to a lot of players, whether they ended up not making the level or they've gone on to, become really good players in the AFL. The big thing I've heard from them, which is good insight, because just insight I unfortunately will never have, is so many of them. Like I look at Nick Graham and hearing him talk, and he felt like maybe he wasn't good enough at the level, but the thing that he thought held him back was he never got consistent games. He was never in there for a good month and a half of getting, 5 or 6 games in a row to really get a feel for it, get that consistency, start to build some confidence, understand everyone around him, and then have that opportunity. And it was interesting as well listening to Jack Steele on Dylan Friend's podcast. He was saying that's a little bit of what he was struggling with at GWS, because they just had such a plethora of good midfielders. He'd be in for 2 games. As soon as you'd have a bad one, next guy comes straight in. And maybe that's where in this position, as you say, we don't have those lock-in wingers where it's like, yes, this guy, that's his position, lock him away. He might get this stretch of games that he has not had really since he's maybe the first couple of seasons where we just threw him in, where he can maybe have this first month of the season and go, okay, mate, make that wing yours. Actually play. We know what to expect. We've got this system now. You know your role. Go out there and play well. And yeah, I think it all just comes down to confidence for him. And I'm fingers crossed that he can just get a good month of footy, get that confidence in, and he just becomes the player that he was meant to be, being I think it was like a number 10 draft pick or so.
And it just felt like one of the things that we were crying out for when he didn't have good games in these last couple of years, when he just gets plugged in, we're like, Lob, if you're going to play this position, you need to get your hands on the ball more. You can't just go missing for all these periods of time. And even though he did make some mistakes, he was around the ball a lot. And he did get the opportunities, and he made a lot of good ones, some bad. But at least he's getting his hands on the ball and getting a lot of touches, which is nice.
And I think we were looking for him, which was the big thing that we called for last year, was we know what he can do. Just actually look for him out wide and use him, because so many times last season he just got burned on the outside when he was in a good spot and we didn't use him. Was there another player that you wanted to mention about someone that you maybe want to see a bit more from as we progress maybe against Melbourne next week?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this guy. I'll mention Jack Nunes, because I actually thought most of the times when he got it or was around the ball, he was making good decisions and was being a good link up, again, being a veteran and making good decisions with it. I feel like I don't necessarily think he's best 22 though. And I think the fact that he can play that wing role is part of the reason for me why he is still in. So I'm interested to see that if he puts in another performance like this against Melbourne, where maybe he again just doesn't get enough of the ball and he does good, nice, fine things.
Yeah.
It might not be enough at this stage where it has been the last couple of years. And obviously he's our man. He's our Lord and Savior, the greatest Carlton goal of all time. But yeah, what do you think? Do you see him? Where do you see his role?
Yeah, look, it didn't excite me seeing Jack Nunes spend a lot of time on the wing, and I guess no one else really run through there except for, your Setterfields and your O'Brien. Yeah. I wanted to see maybe a Willow get a chance there, maybe Zach Fisher, maybe Zach Williams. I thought we'd experiment a little bit more with that position. I don't know if we're looking for like that attacking winger, defensive winger, and maybe that's why he's getting it, because I ended up writing notes, basically just a couple of dot points on every single player's performance. And I just want to go to mine because I have a couple of them. It was just nothing new or all that exciting from Nunes. I think we all know what we're going to get from him. Another 6 out of 10 performance. And I think the last point is probably just what I want is just, I'm hoping that the likes of O'Brien and others can sort of go past him, but he's just a fine depth player. And I'm not unhappy if he's there, but I hope that we can just move past him. You're not going to be unhappy if he's there, but we need to be better. And we need to be starting to move past a guy like him and him just be depth, breaking case of emergency. That's kind of where I see him. I hope he doesn't start round one, no offense to him, just because I want us to do more. And maybe, looking down, like a guy that excited me in the first, I reckon, 10 minutes was like a Sam Philp. Sort of played that half forward role where he looked hungry. He won a bit of the ball, was doing some nice things. He maybe wasn't, the polished article. He turned the ball over a little bit, but I think he's someone now that I maybe have as a bit of a smoky come second half of the season, potentially, that maybe he can slide into one of those roles and we can try to do it from inside rather than at the end of the season trying to trade or bring someone in to play that wing role.
Yeah, you threw a few names out there, and I feel like we did a laundry list in the last episode of all the blokes that they could put on there. But I guess that's the disappointing or the thing that to see more of is like, Nunes is going to be a safe option probably for the rest of the season on that wing. But I think if we're striving for what we want, almost anybody, chuck them on there and let's see what they've got.
100%. Look, there's one last guy I want to touch on in this sort of segment is Will Setterfield. He's someone that I tweeted about during the game that I was actually quite surprised by his performance. So I want to get your take. What did you make? Were you happy with his role? Because he's been put back onto the wing, which last season it was kind of funny. I remember he played against Essendon in a preseason game last year on the wing, and I quite liked it. And I talked him up saying this could be actually a really nice role for him. And then during the season, we're going, he's an inside midfielder. Why is he playing on the wing? He lines up there. I thought he had a decent performance. Are you happy to see him there? What did you make of his game?
Definitely decent. I'm kind of putting him in the Nunes category as well. I didn't feel anything spectacular from him. And man, we were so high on him a few years ago when he was getting all that midfield time. He's not going to be getting that midfield like on the ball time this year. Not happening with what we've got now. So I didn't think it was a spectacular performance either. I wasn't ripping my hair out with what he was doing and yelling Will at the TV, which is nice. We want as little of that as possible. But again, it's just like if the role is the wing and the only role that he can nail down is that wing position, I feel like there might be other guys that push him out quickly, but he's a good player.
Yeah, it is so interesting just to keep reiterating the fact that no one else was on the wing, which is just so surprising for me. But I think he surprised me in the fact that the last time I saw him was that, I think, Geelong game last year, where I hate being so mean to players, but that was probably the worst individual performance I have ever seen of any player coming in. It was just completely devoid of confidence. As soon as he got the ball, he'd stuff it up somehow. He'd fumble. He'd turn the ball over. He'd get tackled immediately. He just did none of the things that the year prior when he won the best, most improved award from us too, from all the fans as well.
Yep.
He just completely went backwards. So maybe I just saw him have a fine performance and went, okay, this is a lot better. I'm impressed, because I wasn't seeing him as someone that was anywhere near our best 22. I'd honestly almost just completely lost faith. And I'm not saying he had the most incredible performance and now all of a sudden it's all going to come good for him and he's going to be nailed on. But it was definitely a step in the right direction. And I'm hoping that because he looked like he had a bit more confidence, he was willing to take the game on, he was doing a lot better things, he wasn't just turning the ball over, that he can hopefully become a bit more of the player that we saw a couple of years ago. But yeah, I'm not 100% nailing it on, but I think he impressed me because my expectations were so low.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I did have low expectations too. So I'm not putting a line through him in any sense.
Yeah.
It's nice that we're in this position where spots are getting nailed down and we're really happy with like that core midfield mix that we've got. And now it's about nailing down these other spots, and there's going to be pressure on these guys, and that's good.
100%. So we've got to touch on a couple of other players that didn't actually feature in the AFL preseason game, but they chucked them in the VFL instead, which were Paddy Dow, Lewis Young, and Ed Curnow. Do you have much of an opinion on those guys not featuring, I suppose?
Dow was interesting.
Yeah.
I guess Curnow, not really a surprise considering, he's not. How do I put it? They're not trying him out to see anything. We know what we're getting with Ed.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to talk about this in our best 22 episodes. So you don't have to answer it now, but it just raises interesting questions about where they think these guys are in the squad. Because, especially Dow and Curnow, it's like, maybe they don't see them as best 22. Which, you can argue that, but you can also argue how they would be. Curnow had a good year last year.
Yeah, no, he's fine, and he's kind of like Nunes. Like, you know what you're getting. He offers you a fine performance, but we need to start going past that. And I love everything that Ed brings, that you don't see, all the off-field stuff, and he's going to be really good in that VFL for teaching the kids and help nurturing them, have that experienced head that's going to get around them. Dow was the interesting one because as soon as Sam Walsh gets injured, you immediately think, oh, Dow's going to step up and hopefully take that midfield role. And to see him not even given a chance, like, I understand why they didn't play Curnow because, give someone else a go. We know what Ed is like. But for Dow not to get that opportunity, and then you start hearing from, whispers from people saying apparently he hasn't really impressed in preseason. So that's why they maybe didn't give him the chance. And then, I haven't seen anything, and I haven't heard anything from the VFL that suggests that he was, best on ground, and everyone go, oh, maybe he should have played, and now he's going to feature, against Melbourne. So it's interesting that he's maybe not in the plans at the moment, because I think looking at that midfield at the moment, the blend's getting a lot better, as we mentioned, but without a Walsh, without that real dynamic player, someone that can explode from, I guess, the stoppages, I thought that was just a perfect opportunity for a guy like Dow to come in there and bring something different rather than just that inside midfielder. And I think we're still maybe one short of that ilk. Like, I'm still not, and maybe this is just my Kennedy bashing, but I'm still not sold on him being that extra piece in there. He didn't necessarily super impress me. It's going to be an interesting one of what Paddy Dow can do this season. It's just another narrative, I think, which unfortunately has started out pretty negative for him.
Yep, that's very fair. I mean, Kennedy, for me, I definitely have him locked down as a best 22 guy at this stage. I think with what he brings, but that doesn't change the fact that like a Nunes that we mentioned, like if you throwing up between playing Dow and playing him like on the wing for long parts of the game, for instance, with may not be his best, like that's his strength or that's his best position. It's like, are we going to learn more in this preseason game by running Nunes out there, or are we going to try things with Dow and put him in different spots if we're not sure on him? So it's interesting, kind of, I guess, just guessing in the minds of the coaches and them right now. But it's not. I mean, you can't say it's a positive thing for him.
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like a watch this space. And then I think as far as sort of good Lewis Young, it's obviously I think they have a few people ahead of him. And then maybe they just wanted to try and get a bit more cohesion between the three tools that were there rather than throwing him in there. And him only playing a couple of minutes. So they decided just play that VFL and knock that role down. Because it sounds like at the moment that he's not 100% ready yet. He's still a little bit raw. So yeah, that's another. We'll see how it progresses for the rest of the season. Not to go super negative, but were there any other maybe issues or concerns that you saw out of that game? Because I touched on with St Kilda's game last season that we saw these certain aspects that ended up playing a role for the rest of the year. Does anything concern you, or even positionally? Is there a position that you still saw not nailed on? We've obviously touched on the wing. Any concerns, issues you can see going forward from this small sample size?
Totally. I guess one thing I'll mention, it wasn't a real glaring thing where I'm like, I had the frustrations that I've had in recent years, but it never goes away, the bomb into the forward line or the kick into the forward 50 where it was literally 4 guys on Charlie. And I can't remember the player that did it, but it was from a mark. And it was like, it's crazy to think that the best option was Charlie with 4 players on him. And it was just a complete turnover. So I don't know whether the instruction is, it's like, let's, I don't know, go to Charlie when you can. I don't know. Or whether it was just a brain fade or there was no other forwards being an option. Like maybe that was the only thing that was possible. But I think I can't wait for the day where we go, gee, those bombs into the forward line or, just all our entries into the forward line are so quality. I think that'll make a big difference for us being a good team.
Yeah, it was something that I noted as well, like just in that second term where even just like the ball movement, there are a few things that I wonder if under pressure, we just started reverting back to type. We were going back to what we know when we're under pressure. This is what I've been taught for the last couple of seasons. And so you go back to that. I think that's the big growth area that Voss has in changing what is our base, changing what is the standard. And I think that when you look at those forward entries, there are multiple of them throughout that sort of after that first quarter where we weren't going the best option. It was either a bit of a bomb or it was to a 3-on-1. And you're just going in your head, surely we had better options. And I think that probably touches on my forward line issue at the moment, just is, I think, personnel. Starting to get a little bit worried the more I look into it. And maybe you have a bit more of a positive outlook, but I think I'm trying to look at like, where are the goals coming from? And you've got Harry, obviously, say he's fully fit. He's, the best forward last year, Coleman medalist. So that's most of your goals there. You have a Charlie Curnow coming back after 2 seasons. And like, whereabouts are you expecting him to what level are you getting from Charlie? How many goals is he going to be contributing? And I think it's going to be a decent amount, but again, you're relying on someone who has not played footy in 2 years. You've then got your smalls. You got Owies, who was fine last season, but he's not a ridiculous goal kicker. I don't think you can rely on him to really kick, 2-3 goals a game, which a lot of those teams have that small forward that can do that. You look at Durden, he's only played about 2 games, so it's hard to say, he's just going to come in and do that next season. Again, we like what we see from these guys, but for us to really take that next step, we need almost like every single person in his forward line to step up, and that's kind of concerning me a little bit. Like J-Sauce, I think, is the fine one where he's probably going to kick you 1 to 2 every week, and that's fine. What is Kemp going to bring to that forward line? And again, it's a guy that hasn't really done at AFL level. Jack Martin, he's a name. Is he ever fit? Is he consistent enough? Yep. I'm just worried about where this second tier of goals is coming from, because Eddie Betts was our second leading goal kicker, I think, last season. You've taken him out of there, and that's absolutely fine. You got a Honey that's injured, who I thought was going to help. I'm just a little bit concerned because there's no one really that you can trust, that you can legitimately go, well, there's your goals every week. And
are you up for No.
Sorry to make it a little bit negative there, but go ahead.
No,
Bobby.
it's very true. But are you up for an impromptu quiz?
Yes, 100%.
You've reeled a couple of them off there. Obviously, Harry kicked the most goals last year, and then it was Edward. Do you know who the next 3 players would be?
Next 3, I don't know particular order.
Don't worry about order. I can live with no order.
Next three. I think I looked at this not that long ago, so it's a bit
Okay.
cheating. But I think Cripper is in there.
Yep. Cripper
I think
13 was
Walshy
fourth.
is in there.
Yeah, Walsh
And then
fifth.
it's either Always or Ed Kerno that is the other one.
Yeah.
I think I might
You're
have just
either
nailed
very
all of
talented
them.
or you've looked at this recently. So no, that's good. It's just crazy to me to think that. Like
Yeah.
Cripper, Walsh, and Kerno in our top 6 goal kickers. That it speaks to your point exactly. And Betts, who's not there anymore.
And I think that's where my concern was. I saw that. I was trying to compare the numbers to look at what we kind of needed to make up. And it's a good thing that midfielders are kicking goals. I think Chera's going to add to that. But then you don't have Walsh for a few games. You're now starting to have to rely on all these other guys to step up. And I do like that we shouldn't be relying on just one guy. It should be system and everyone stands up and contributes. And I think that's what it's going to be. I think, he's going to kick a couple. Durden's kicking a couple. Fisher might do it. But I just wish I had a little bit more faith in seeing someone has done it last season, seeing that, always just kick, your however many goals, you kick 30 goals and you can, go perfect. There you go. But yeah, it's hard to know where it's coming from. And that's just my little bit of a concern, particularly this week where at times when I'm thinking in my head, okay, if this is a real game situation, we need a goal right now. Who's kicking it? And you can't really just go, yeah, it's that guy. Which is harsh. And then you've got the injury at the moment with Harry that he should be fine for round 1, but then he hasn't had that perfect preseason again. It's just, slightly concerning at this stage.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think on the negative side, maybe one more thing that I'd raise, and this is probably cherry picking a negative, but I just thought it'd be worthwhile to call out. I'm just keen to hear what your opinion. He had very little game time, and it's hard to when we weren't there watching it on the broadcast. Fogarty.
Yeah.
It's not just this game. Like I'm not just talking about this game in isolation, but just him from what we've seen through last year. And I know that we were undermanned in this. I just don't really have him kind of that close either, personally. And some people might really disagree and see some real positive things. I'm just trying to picture the best version of him. And he's young still. He can. I'm just like, what is the best version of him, and where does that fit into this team? I don't see him overtaking the likes of Durds and the like. I don't think he's going to be that wing guy. So I don't see where that role is for him.
It's one of the strangest people, I think, that we have on our list where no one really expected him to do much last year. His first few games were unbelievable. He was playing this like small forward, just tackling role, doing all these amazing things.
Goals.
And just fell away for the rest of the season. And he's still someone that, even though I think last year he was seen as like best 22, anytime you'd ask us to do him, and he's even in our emergencies. And it comes down to, as soon as you were talking, what I wrote down is just, what is he? And I don't mean that in a super negative sense, because he does have some good attributes. He's that hard tackler. He seemed to be able to kick some goals, but is he a small forward? Is he a midfielder? Does he do a bit of both? I'm yet to know what his role is. And it was hard because he didn't play a lot. And maybe that even shows you that they don't see him as being nailed on best 22 at the moment. He's one of those fringe players, but they want to give a bit of experience to. I think he's a good player to have on the list because you can almost chuck him in a few different roles. And depth is always good. He's better than chucking in a kid that's never played before. And he's definitely a lot better than some of the guys we have had previously. But yeah, it just comes down to, I don't know what his position is, and I'm not sure what his role is. And maybe they haven't figured that out just yet, but it is maybe slightly concerning in a way because I don't know exactly what he's going to bring. Whereas I look at so many of the other players and I go, yeah, you're this, you bring this to the team, and you're going to play here. And it's so many question marks for a guy like him. And they only, multiply when he only plays like a quarter of footy in a practice match.
And the reason that I guess it's even more negative for me, and I'm not saying that this is the sole reason why this happened, but do they have him over Dow in the pecking order of what this team could be? Like, I know he didn't play very much, but Dow didn't get to play at all with this group. Like, it's pretty wild to me if they have him ahead of Dow just in the AFL team mix. I hope that's not the case.
It might just be because he offers multiple things. So if you're looking for maybe like your last
Yeah,
bench spot, do you want
true.
someone that you can play maybe wing, midfield, forward line, like you can throw him around rather
Hmm.
than Dow. It's like you're playing midfield and that's it. Maybe that's the reason that he's above in the pecking
Yep.
order, just for versatility, which is definitely a good thing. But it's almost, and again, this is going to come off super negative, but with a Fogarty, it's like that, jack of all trades, but master of none. He needs
Yeah.
to nail down something that is his brand, that he's going to offer week in, week out, that no one else does. Currently, I'm not too sure exactly what that is. And that's the worrying part for him. But at least it's a good question. It's something he can work on to try and find his way into this team. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on from the preseason game before we have just a quick little preview for the Melbourne preseason game this week?
Let's get into it. I'm excited. It's going to be some very different opposition, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess what are your thoughts going into it? Is there anything that you're really wanting to see? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Give me your sort of overarching themes going into the game.
Definitely excited. It's going to be good to be within the four walls once again. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at my best 22 as we chat right now. The back line, I'm interested to see what we roll out there
Yeah.
in this game and how they function. Because with now that it's the McDonald and McGovern kind of duo there, it's like, wow, it's going to be interesting. Doc, whether he is, I'm not sure if they've said whether he could play this week, but probably more likely round one, if anything, which is amazing.
Insane.
But then Plowman didn't play in this game.
Yeah.
Stocker didn't play in this game. Woo, there's some guys looking to go through there. So I'm keen to see how the backline functions and as one thing to look for.
Yeah. And then even like your Jack Martin as well is another one that hasn't featured that should hopefully maybe be available. I think this is just going to be the perfect test. We played against St Kilda that I think worked really well because we'd played them last year. So we can compare. And I think we've made strides. I can see us being a better team. And now you come up against the reigning premiers. Again, it's a preseason game and the result doesn't necessarily matter. It's about how does your system hold up, drilling in all the things that are going to hold you in good stead come the end of the season, and experimenting a little bit, trying things out. It's not all going to work. And who better to do that against than the best team in the AFL currently? And I think, the defense is going to be interesting because they have so many multiple tools. They have so many versatile smalls as well. It's the perfect way to just go, okay, we've been building this over preseason. We've got the three. How does it go up against one of the best forwards in the comp? And then I think, again, same with the midfield. How is that blend going to work against such an explosive midfield that, if you were to rank them all, you'd have the doggies up there and they torched them in that grand final, in that, game-winning chunk there in that sort of third quarter. So
absolutely,
it's just the best test to see how we match up against the best and how far away are we from being the best. I honestly can't wait. I'm honestly a little bit nervous seeing what they did to North Melbourne, but then again, it's North Melbourne and it is preseason. So who knows? Maybe we ended up beating them by 10 goals and all of a sudden we're flag favorites.
Exactly.
Crazier things have happened.
The goals one from you before is a great shout too. I think, like, how amazing will it be if we see one of these guys we've talked about kick four? Sauce kick four, Dirds kick four. One of you guys just take it upon yourself to show that you can be that guy to kick a bag. Because now you've got me a little bit worried that if Harry misses some time, where are those goals going to come from? So someone put your hand up against Melbourne. That'd be nice.
I think you raised the perfect point where it's probably my one negative going into like this podcast of what I saw in that St Kilda game, where I was really hoping one or two or multiple players really just put their hand up and said, that's my position. I'm going to be a superstar in this team. Whereas I think that Fisher was probably the one, and there wasn't a lot of others as far as those fringe guys are concerned. So I'm hoping in this Melbourne game, it's another chance for these fringe guys to just get experience, know their role, and hopefully just nail down a position come round one. And it just makes it easier to know who are our best players, or even it being all of these players played well, and now you're having to pick from them rather than us going, oh, it's Nunes or Setterfield on the wing because that's all we've got. Instead of being excited because Philp, the wing role is his. something like that. That's what I'm hoping to see. And I guess,
Yeah.
time will tell. We're all excited. We'll be down there seeing our first bit of action for 2022. So look, that is going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for sticking with us. See you guys next time.